Single dad returned a Millionaire CEO's lost briefcase. Then she found his name inside. Ben Carter returned Vivian Sloane's black briefcase at 4:43 on a Thursday afternoon, 17 minutes before his 13-year-old daughter was supposed to walk onto a school stage he had promised not to miss. Vivian thanked him, set the case on the conference table, and flipped open the brass latches. Then she stopped. Ben's name was clipped to the first page inside. It was not buried in fine print. It sat beneath a heading that read, Workforce Continuity Risks, followed by 3 words in red capital letters, Non-retention recommended. Ben did not have time to understand why the Millionaire chief executive preparing to buy his employer had a file recommending that he be fired. He only knew that June had saved him a seat in the front row, and he had spent too many years teaching her that his promises came with invisible exceptions. Vivian looked from the page to the embroidered name above the pocket of his gray work shirt. Benjamin Carter? That's what my mother calls me when she's disappointed. The joke landed badly, mostly because Vivian was still staring at the page. Ben nodded toward the case. I found it beside the loading bay stairs. The strap was caught under a pallet jack. Security said you were still upstairs. Did you open it? The question was quick. So was the suspicion inside it. No, Dad, tell. Ben checked the wall clock. If I had, I probably wouldn't have carried it through a building with 40 cameras. Vivian's eyes moved down the document. She was 51, dressed in a navy suit that looked expensive without trying to prove it, and known around Hearthline Medical Supply as the woman who had turned Anchorwell Distribution from 3 warehouses into a company worth several $100 million. The local managers had spent all week warning employees not to approach her unless spoken to. Now she seemed less interested in the lost case than in the line beneath Ben's name. It says you're an inventory systems coordinator, she said. 12 years with the company. Why would they classify you as a continuity risk? Ben put one hand on the back of a chair. His answer could cost him his job. Not answering could do the same thing. At 5 o'clock, June's 8th grade design showcase would begin without him. You're buying Hearthline, he said. Ask the people selling it. I'm asking you, and I'm asking for 10 minutes tomorrow morning. Right now, I have somewhere I said I'd be. Vivian glanced at the clock, then at the papers in her case. Powerful people were accustomed to making time feel like everyone else's problem. Ben had learned that in 12 years of meetings that began with the phrase just 5 minutes and ended with a text to June saying he was sorry. 8 o'clock, Vivian said. Here. I start at 6. Then you'll already be in the building. Ben almost smiled. That is how clocks work. He turned toward the door. Mr. Carter. He stopped. Vivian held up the first page. Do you know who prepared this? Ben saw the initials at the bottom. M.V. Martin Vale. Hearthline's chief operating officer and the man who had told employees the acquisition would create opportunities for everyone willing to be flexible. Yes, Ben said. I know exactly who did. He left before she could ask another question. Ben reached Harlow Middle School at 5:06 to story. The lobby smelled like poster paint and reheated pizza. Parents stood beside folding tables covered in model cities, solar ovens, handmade water filters, and bridges built from wooden sticks. Ben moved through them with his work badge still clipped to his shirt and a dark grease mark across one sleeve. June stood at the end of the gym beside a waist-high model of a warehouse. Tiny cardboard shelves filled the building. Colored strings represented the paths workers took to pick an order. A blue index card rested against an empty chair in front of her display. Reserved for Dad, it said. June saw him, then looked deliberately at the digital clock above the bleachers. 6 minutes, Ben said, breathing hard. That's not late. That's dramatically timed. MC. Ellis introduced the projects at 5. Then I'm 6 minutes late. Yes, that's usually what 6 minutes after something starts means. June had inherited his dry delivery and her mother's refusal to soften a fact for the comfort of the person who caused it. Her dark hair was tied back with a green elastic. She wore the Anchorwell blue sweater Ben had told her not to wear, because he did not want to think about the sale for one evening. He noticed that irony and decided the day had made its point. He lifted the blue card from the chair. You saved it. I said I would. That was the rule in their house. Bad news before bedtime, promises before plans. Ben and June made it 3 years earlier, after her mother, Alyssa, accepted a job in Denver and waited until the last possible weekend to explain that she was moving. Alyssa had not meant to hurt June. She had been afraid that saying it early would only make June worry longer. Ben had understood the logic because he used the same logic every day. June had called it what it was. A surprise is supposed to be good, she had said. If it's bad, you're just late telling me. So they made the rule. If something could change their life, they said it before bedtime. No silent fixing. No polished version after the adults had decided everything. Ben sat and listened while June explained her project. She had mapped the walking distance created by poor shelf placement and showed how moving the most requested items closer to the packing stations reduced wasted steps. She had built it after visiting Hearthline on Family Day and watching Ben trace routes through the warehouse. The average worker saves almost a mile during a full shift, she told the science teacher. Your father helped. June looked at Ben. He showed me how to measure it. I decided what to move. Ben felt a small, clean pride. Not the loud kind people posted online. The better kind. The kind that made him want to deserve. The way his daughter still included him in her sentences. On the drive home, June held the blue reserve seat card against the air vent. Their 10-year-old Subaru made a rattling sound near 40 miles an hour, and Ben had spent 2 weeks pretending not to hear it. What happened at work? She asked. Kept his eyes on the road. People walked around carrying folders and acting like the folders were doing the thinking. Dad. The buyer was there. I know. Everybody knows. You cleaned your boots on a Wednesday. Ben smiled despite himself. Is your job safe? She asked. There it was. Not are you getting fired? June had learned to approach bad news from the side, the way a person approached a nervous dog. Nobody has told me it isn't. That's not what I asked. Ben thought of the red words beside his name. He thought of the rent, the car payment, June's braces, the summer flight to Denver, and the emergency fund that had become a transmission fund before the transmission had even admitted it was dying. There may be changes, he said. I have a meeting tomorrow. I'll tell you when I know something real. June folded the blue card once, precisely down the center. Before bedtime? She asked. Before bedtime. It was not technically a lie. Ben told himself that twice, which was usually how he knew he was lying. At 5:58 the next morning, Ben stepped onto Hearthline's warehouse floor. The building sat on the industrial edge of Milwaukee, close enough to the interstate that the loading docks never escaped the low growl of trucks. Hearthline distributed ordinary medical supplies to clinics, rehabilitation centers, and independent pharmacies across Wisconsin and northern Illinois. Nothing glamorous moved through the building. Gloves, wound dressings, braces, test strips, tubing, mobility aids, products most people never noticed until the day they needed them. Ben's job was to make sure the computer's version of the warehouse matched the physical one. That sounded simple to people who had never watched a barcode get scanned into 3 locations before lunch. He monitored inventory exceptions, corrected routing errors, and designed rules that stopped orders from being counted as shipped until they actually crossed a dock door. He liked systems because systems told the truth eventually. A missing box left a gap. A false timestamp created a pattern. A manager could call a delay temporary, but 600 temporary delays in the same hour formed a confession. Patrice Lawson was waiting beside his workstation with 2 paper cups of coffee. She supervised the night shift and had worked at Hearthline 2 years longer than Ben. Vale wants you upstairs, she said. Good morning to you too. I got you coffee. That is the good part. Ben took the cup. What's the bad part? Patrice glanced toward the glass offices above the warehouse. He asked security who found Sloane's case. Then he asked whether you were alone. I was. Were you smart enough to stay that way? I returned a bag, Patrice. I didn't rob a bank. A bag full of documents about a $200 million acquisition. That sounds like a terrible place to leave a bag. Patris did not laugh. She leaned closer. Martin had supervisors in here at 10 last night, changing schedule codes. Ben looked past her at the main dashboard. Green blocks represented orders marked complete. Yellow blocks showed orders waiting for verification. The display was cleaner than it had been at the end of his shift. Too clean. Which codes? Weekend recovery, caregiver restrictions, attendance, exceptions. Ben set down his coffee. Did they change yours? He asked. Patrice's jaw tightened. Her husband had multiple sclerosis, and she kept Tuesdays free to take him to appointments. For 6 years, Hearthline had described that arrangement as a fixed schedule accommodation. 2 months earlier, managers began calling it limited availability. They changed everybody's, she said. Martin Vale's assistant appeared at the stairwell door. Ben, now. Vale did not offer him a seat. He stood at the window of his office with both hands in his pockets, looking down at the morning shift. At 56, he had the practiced calm of a man who believed volume was unnecessary when other people's paychecks could make his point for him. You found Miss Sloane's briefcase, he said, beside the south stairs. And you opened it. No tightas. She says you saw a confidential page. She opened it in front of me. Vale turned. What did you read? My name? Anything else? 3 words beside it. For the first time, Vale's expression changed. Not guilt. Irritation. Those documents are preliminary, he said. Acquisitions require scenario planning. Roles overlap. Buyers ask hard questions. Did the buyer ask you to recommend me for termination? Vale walked behind his desk. Nobody is being terminated today. That is not the same answer. Your title will likely duplicate a regional role at Anchorwell. Your schedule has also become increasingly inflexible. Ben felt heat climb the back of his neck. My schedule is 6 to 2:30. The schedule you approved when I became June's primary parent. And yet you've declined 5 weekend assignments this quarter. I worked 3 others. The 2 I declined were assigned with less than 12 hours' notice. Vale slid a form across the desk. It was titled, Transition Availability Commitment. Employees who signed agreed to accept shift changes, weekend assignments, and travel during the 90 days surrounding the acquisition. This would address some of the concern, Vale said. Ben read the final paragraph. Refusal to sign could be considered during retention decisions. You put my name on a list, he said, and now you're offering to remove it if I agree never to know when I'm going home. I'm offering you a chance to demonstrate commitment. To Hearthline. To the transition. Ben thought of June folding the blue card in the car. I need to review this. It expires at noon. Then you gave me 3 hours to reorganize being a father. Vale's voice cooled. Be careful about turning a business decision into a personal insult. You listed my custody schedule as a risk. You already made it personal. Ben left the form on the desk. At 8 o'clock, Vivian Sloane sat alone in the same conference room where she had opened the briefcase. It rested beside her chair with both latches closed. The paper bearing Ben's name lay on the table. She had removed her jacket and rolled her sleeves to the elbow. A legal pad held a short list of questions. Ben noticed that the first one had been underlined twice. Mr. Vale says your role is redundant, she began. Martin thinks honesty is redundant too. He still keeps some around for visitors. Vivian studied him. You're angry. I'm scheduled to be unemployed by people who keep calling the schedule preliminary. The list came from Hearthline. I did not request names. But it was in your case. My chief financial officer added it to the diligence packet. So you didn't ask for the names. You just brought them home. That one reached her. Ben saw it. Vivian placed a second document beside the list. Hearthline's executives say you resist process changes, undermine supervisors, and create unnecessary verification steps that slow order completion. Which process changes? That's what I'm asking you. Ben took a chair. When does Anchorwell count an order as shipped? When the carrier accepts it. Hearthline counts it when a label prints. Vivian frowned. The integration report says both systems use doc confirmation. They did until February. Why change it? Because labels print faster than trucks arrive. Vivian leaned back. She understood immediately, which told Ben she had built more of her company than her public biography probably admitted. You're saying their on-time numbers are inflated. I'm saying the dashboard can be green while an order is still sitting 10 feet from the printer. How many orders? Depends on the day. Yesterday. I don't know yet. The exception queue was cleared after my shift. By whom? That is the kind of question that gets a man called resistant. Vivian tapped the page with his name. Why you? Ben considered giving her the simple answer, because he had complained. Simple answers were satisfying and often incomplete. 3 years ago, we had a picking error that sent the wrong size equipment to 27 clinics, he said. Nobody was hurt, but the replacements cost us a major account. I built a verification rule we call the balance gate. An order can't close unless the item count, location scan, and doc scan agree. It slowed the first week by 4%. I read about that system. Did my name appear there too? Vivian looked down at the papers. That was an answer. Ben continued. In February, management bypassed the doc part for selected accounts. In April, they expanded the bypass. I objected. In May, my performance review changed from exceeds expectations to needs alignment. Do you have evidence? The change control logs exist. Can you access them? Yes. Then show me. Ben shook his head. If I pull confidential records for a buyer without authorization, Vale can fire me for cause before lunch. I can authorize it. You don't own Hearthline. Not yet. That word is doing a lot of work. Vivian's mouth tightened. She looked again at the non-retention list, and Ben saw the conflict she had been hiding since he walked in. She wanted the truth. She also wanted the deal. The acquisition closes next Friday, she said. I have a board review Monday. If Hearthline misrepresented operational data, I need to know before then. And if they didn't, then the transition continues, including the list. Vivian did not answer quickly enough. Ben stood. That's what I thought. Sit down, Mr. Carter. I have work. You may not have it in 8 days. Then I should probably finish something while I do. At the door, Vivian called his name again. This time her voice was quieter. I grew Anchorwell by buying companies that had been badly managed, she said. Every seller says the problems are temporary. Every unhappy employee says the problems are structural. I cannot make a $200 million decision based on which person sounds more sincere. Ben turned back. Good. Don't believe me? She waited. Count what's on the floor, he said. A box doesn't care who wins the argument. At 9:15, Vivian walked onto the warehouse floor without Vale, without her chief financial officer, and without the small parade of executives who had followed her during the official tour. She wore a reflective vest over her white shirt and carried a clipboard. Ben was at Station 14 investigating an order the dashboard said had left the building 11 hours earlier. The order sat on a pallet, 6 feet away. Is that one? Vivian asked. That is one. How do I know it's the same order? Ben pointed to the shipping label, the location sticker, and the status line on his monitor. Same number, same item count, same destination. According to the system, the carrier accepted it at 10:32 last night. Vivian looked toward the dock. Which carrier? North Star Freight. When was their last pickup? 8:40. She wrote that down. They walked to the outbound lanes. Ben showed her how to read the paper tags clipped to each pallet, how the color of a corner stripe identified the shift, and how a handwritten letter R meant the order had been held for recovery. Recovery was supposed to mean a damaged package, a missing item. Lately it meant almost anything the dashboard was not allowed to admit. Vivian counted 31 pallets marked R. "The report I received this morning shows 6 delayed orders," she said. "Then 25 have discovered invisibility. How long has this been happening?" "The bypass started in February. The volume got worse after you sent the labor target." Vivian stopped walking. "What labor target?" 20% improvement in cost per order after acquisition. That was a projection, not an instruction. It arrived in a slide titled, "Required Synergies." Required over 3 years. Vale printed the first page and posted it in the supervisor room. The 3-year part must have been too heavy for the copier. Patris approached from the end of the aisle. She had removed her supervisor vest and carried a stack of exception slips. When she saw Vivian, she almost turned away. "Miss Lawson," Ben said. "How many orders did night shift physically load?" Patris looked at Vivian. "Am I being asked by Hearthline or Anchorwell?" "By me," Vivian said. "That didn't answer her," Ben said. Vivian held his gaze for a second, then looked back at Patris. "Hearthline remains your employer. I cannot promise protection I don't legally control. I can promise I will write down exactly what you say and exactly what happens afterward." It was not comforting, but it was honest. Patris handed her the slips. "We loaded 184, she said. "The dashboard closed 267. Supervisors told us to print labels before midnight and clear the exception queue. They said the buyer was measuring daily completion." "Were people instructed to work off the clock?" Vivian asked. "Not in those words." "What words?" Patris's laugh held no humor. "The team stays until the team is done. Then they adjusted scheduled hours the next week, so overtime wouldn't show in the acquisition reports." Ben watched Vivian's pen stop. "Do you have pay records?" she asked. "At home." "Don't bring them to work. Keep the originals." That was the first moment Ben believed Vivian might be willing to damage her own deal rather than merely demand that the truth become less expensive. It lasted less than a minute. Martin Vale came down the central aisle with 2 security officers and Malcolm Price, Anchorwell's chief financial officer. Malcolm was in his early 60s, silver-haired, trim, and composed in the way of men who never had to run when they were late. He looked at the delayed pallets, then at Vivian's clipboard. "We have a diligence meeting upstairs," he said. "Move it," Vivian replied. Vale held out a hand toward Patris's exception slips. "Those are internal operational documents." Vivian closed the clipboard over them. "Then they should match the operational documents you gave me." Vale's face reddened. "You're allowing a disgruntled employee to lead an audit on the warehouse floor." "I'm counting pallets. Without authorization. I was invited into this building to evaluate it. Under a defined diligence protocol." Malcolm stepped between them with the patience of someone separating 2 people at a dinner party. "Vivian, Martin is right about one thing. We need to maintain the protocol. If there is a data question, we request a reconciliation and give Hearthline time to respond. There are 31 pallets in front of us. Then Hearthline will explain them." Ben said, "They've been explaining them since February. That's how the number became 6. Vale turned toward him. "Return to your station." Vivian did not defend Ben. She looked at Malcolm, then at the security officers, then at the employees beginning to watch from nearby aisles. The public rule said Anchorwell valued transparency. The real rule, Ben realized, was that transparency had to arrive through the proper door, at the proper time, in a format that did not embarrass anyone with authority. "Go back to work, Mr. Carter," Vivian said. The disappointment hit harder than Ben expected. He had not wanted to trust her. Apparently, some part of him had done it anyway. He returned to Station 14. Behind him, the executives walked upstairs carrying Patris's exception slips. At 11:40, Vale's assistant delivered another copy of the transition availability commitment. A yellow note was attached to the top. Your earlier discussion does not alter the noon deadline. Ben placed the form beside his keyboard. The signature line waited at the bottom with the smug patience of an empty space that assumed it would eventually be obeyed. He called Alyssa during his lunch break. She answered on the third ring from a hospital stairwell in Denver. Ben could hear carts rolling and a voice paging a physician in the background. Alyssa managed clinical training for a rehabilitation network. Her job was the reason she had moved, but not the only reason their marriage had ended. By the final year, they had become two capable people, quietly resenting each other for needing anything. "Is June okay?" she asked immediately. "She's fine. You never call before 6 unless something is broken." Ben looked at the form. "The company sale may affect my job. May affect, or will affect. My name is on a preliminary list." "What kind of list?" "The kind with red letters." Alyssa went silent. "Does June know?" "Not the list." "Bien tortube. I found out yesterday. I'm trying to understand it before I scare her." That sentence is exactly how we ended up telling her about Denver 3 days before the moving truck came. "I know." "Do you?" He closed his eyes. Alyssa could be infuriating because she remembered his failures without needing to exaggerate them. "They'll reconsider if I sign an availability agreement," he said. "What does it require?" "Nights, weekends, travel. Short notice? So who takes care of June?" "That's what I'm trying to solve." "No, you're trying to solve your employment. June is part of the cost." Ben lowered his voice. "I called for help, Alyssa. Try not to make me regret it." Her tone softened. "All right, I can adjust the summer schedule. If it becomes unstable there, she can stay with me for the school year." The suggestion was practical. It was generous. Ben hated it instantly. She has a school here, friends, a life. She has a life here too. For 6 weeks, every summer. I am not trying to take her from you. It sounds exactly like that. It sounds like a backup plan. You taught me to make those. Ben looked through the break room window. On the warehouse floor, employees moved between racks with scanners in their hands while managers watched the dashboard. He had spent years believing that a good father removed uncertainty before his child could feel it. The possibility of June leaving felt like proof that he had failed at the one job that mattered. "I'll handle it," he said. "That is not a plan. It's what I have." He ended the call before the conversation could become a catalog of everything he was afraid to lose. At 11:56, Ben signed the availability agreement. He stared at his name for several seconds after the pen left the paper. The signature looked ordinary. That offended him. A man could redraw the boundaries of his daughter's life, and the ink did not even have the decency to shake. Vale accepted the form without a smile. "This will be taken into consideration." "Taken into consideration?" "I never said it guaranteed retention." Ben understood then that the form had never been a bridge off the list. It was evidence that he could be pushed. "I want a copy," he said. Vale slid it into a folder. "Human Resources will provide one." "No. Return to work." Ben held out his hand. "You asked for commitment. I'm asking for a photocopy." Vale's eyes moved toward the glass wall, checking who might see the exchange. Then he made the copy himself. At 2:20, Ben's manager assigned him to a 6 o'clock systems test. It was the first time in 4 years Ben had been ordered to stay that late on a school night. He called June from the parking lot. "I need you to go to Mrs. Hand's after school," he said. "I have to stay for a test." "You said we were getting groceries." "We'll go tomorrow. I need the display board for Monday. I can pick it up on my way home?" "You don't know what color I need. Text me a picture." June was quiet. "What?" Ben asked. "Nothing." "June too. You always say nothing when you mean you don't want to talk yet. I thought I'd try it." He leaned against the car. "There's pressure at work. I'm doing what I can to keep the job." "Is that the bad news?" "Part of it." "What's the other part?" Ben looked at the copy of the agreement in his hand. "I might have to work different hours for a while." How different? I don't know. Did you agree to that? He could have lied. Instead, he found a smaller truth and used it as cover. I'm trying to make sure we're okay. That isn't an answer. I know. Mrs. Han called June's name in the background. Bad news before bedtime, June said. Then she hung up. The 6 o'clock systems test turned out to be a meeting. Vale, Ben's manager, and 2 people from Human Resources sat at a table with a laptop. No equipment was being tested. Vale folded his hands. We need to discuss your conduct during the buyer's visit. Ben remained standing. You told my daughter I was testing a system. I did no such thing. You knew I would. The Human Resources Director, Celia Ward, gestured toward a chair. Then, please sit. He sat because anger was easier for other people to dismiss when it remained standing. Celia read from a prepared statement. Ben was accused of sharing unverified operational information with Anchorwell, disrupting the diligence process and encouraging employees to bypass reporting lines. Pending review, he was prohibited from accessing change control logs without written approval. Am I suspended? He asked. No. Am I allowed to do my job? Your access will be limited to routine inventory exceptions. Then, no. Vale said, this is temporary. Like the delayed orders? Celia pushed a warning form toward him. You may submit a written response. Ben read the accusation twice. He wanted to refuse the paper, walk out, and force them to explain why the man allegedly too dangerous for their records was still safe enough to correct their inventory. But a refusal would become another line in his file. June's face appeared in his mind, not crying or pleading, just watching him avoid the answer. He signed only to acknowledge receipt and wrote beneath his name, I dispute the accuracy and will respond with records already distributed in the normal course of my work. Vale read the sentence. What records? Ben stood. The ones you forgot were already in everybody's inbox. At home, June had left a plate of pasta covered in foil on the stove. Mrs. Han had gone back next door. The house was quiet except for the washing machine. Ben found June at the dining table working on her project. The blue reserve seat card had been unfolded and placed beside her ruler. A crease now ran through the word Dad. He set the copy of the availability agreement on the table. This is the rest of the bad news, he said. June read slowly. Ben watched her stop at the paragraph about nights, weekends, and travel. You signed it? Yes. Before you told me. I had 3 hours. You had my phone number. You were in school. You texted me a picture of a dog wearing safety glasses at 10:17. Ben had no defense. The dog had been funny. It had also apparently destroyed his timeline. I was scared, he said. June looked up. Ben almost never said those words. He said concerned, careful, realistic, or working on it. Scared was a word he treated like a loose wire. Of getting fired? She asked. Of losing the job, the house. Of your mom deciding you're better off in Denver. Of you deciding she's right. June's expression changed. Mom said that. She offered a backup plan. And you decided everything without me because you didn't want her to. I decided to keep my job. You don't even know if signing keeps it. Ben looked at the paper. No, I don't. June pushed it back across the table. You keep saying you're protecting me when you mean you don't want to watch me worry. The sentence was not polished. It was not delivered like a speech. She said it while lining up the edge of the form with the edge of the table, because children often told the truth while pretending to be occupied with something smaller. Ben pulled out a chair. You're right, he said. I know. You could let me finish. You had since yesterday. He almost laughed. June did not. So Ben told her about the briefcase, the red words, the false shipping times, the meeting with Vivian, and the warning he had signed. He kept the business details simple, but he did not clean the story. When he finished, June stared at the little warehouse model she had built. "Your whole job is making the computer tell the truth about what's on the shelf," she said. "Basically. And they might fire you because you did it. That is one version." "What's their version?" Ben considered it. "That I care more about being right than about making the system work." "Do you?" The question surprised him because the honest answer was not automatically no. Ben had used correctness as armor before. During the divorce, he had documented every late pickup and every missed call until Alyssa finally asked whether he wanted to raise June or win the case file. He had stopped after that, but the part of him that trusted records more than people remained fully employed. "Sometimes," he said. June nodded. "Then don't do that. That is extremely specific advice. I'm 13. You get what you pay for." This time they both smiled. Before bed, Ben emailed his written response to Celia. He attached 3 monthly exception summaries he had sent to management before the acquisition. They showed the rising gap between labels printed and trucks loaded. He copied his personal email only on the response, not on the confidential reports, and printed the delivery confirmation for his records. Then he placed the availability agreement in the kitchen drawer, where June knew they kept documents that could change their life. No silent fixing. At 7 the next morning, his access badge flashed red. The security guard behind the glass was a man named Luis, who had eaten lunch with Ben every Wednesday for 5 years. Luis looked at the red light, then at Ben, and seemed embarrassed on behalf of the door. "I'm supposed to call upstairs," he said. "Am I supposed to wait inside or outside?" Luis picked up the phone. "Outside." 10 minutes later, Celia Ward came down with an envelope. Ben was placed on paid investigatory suspension for possible misuse of company records and interference with the acquisition process. He could not enter the building, contact customers, or access Hearthline systems. The letter did not mention the warning response he had sent the night before. It did not need to. The timing did the work. "The reports I attached were sent to management months ago," Ben said. "I didn't remove them from the company. The investigation will consider that." "Who is conducting it?" "Outside counsel." "Chosen by Vale?" Celia lowered her voice. "Go home, Ben." He looked through the glass at the warehouse. Patra stood near the time clock, pretending to study a schedule. When their eyes met, she pressed 2 fingers to her own wrist, then pointed toward the parking lot. "Pay records." She had not forgotten. Ben nodded once and left. He drove 3 blocks before the Subaru's phone connection rang through the speakers. Vivian Sloane's name appeared on the dashboard. "Did you order my suspension?" he asked when he answered. "No, Ta. Did you know about it?" There was a pause. "Not until 20 minutes ago. That is becoming a popular feature of your acquisition." "Where are you?" "Not at work." I can see that." Ben glanced in the mirror. A dark sedan had left the Hearthline lot behind him. "Are you following me?" "My driver is. Pull into the diner on Grant Street." That sentence is not less strange because you admitted it. "I found something else in the briefcase." Ben pulled into the diner. Vivian arrived 5 minutes later, carrying the same black case. Without the executive group around her, she looked tired. Not fragile. Tired in the specific way of a person who had spent the night learning that expensive advice could still be wrong. They took a booth in the back. Vivian ordered coffee. Ben ordered nothing because unemployed men, even temporarily unemployed men, became aware of the price of toast. Vivian opened the case and removed a bound report. On the cover was a Hearthline logo and the title Network Efficiency Platform. Beneath it, smaller letters identified the platform as proprietary operational technology developed by Hearthline Leadership. I. "Have you seen this?" she asked. Ben turned several pages. The language had been rewritten, diagrams polished, colors changed. But the rules were familiar. Balance gate. Exception. Aging. Location reconciliation. The same system Ben had built after the clinic order failure 3 years earlier. "This is mine," he said. "Are you sure?" "Page 17. She turned to it. "There's a mistake in the formula," Ben said. "It adds canceled orders to open exceptions. I fixed it in version 4. They copied version 3. Vivian removed another sheet. It showed projected savings from installing the system across Anchorwell's network, $18 million over 4 years. The acquisition price assumed those savings. So did the loan package Vivian's board had approved. Hearthline represented that Martin Vale's operations team created it, she said. Martin's operations team did create the 3-ring binder. Your name appears in the metadata of an appendix. Malcolm's analyst found it after I asked him to trace every reference to you." Ben sat back. The name in the case had not been there, only because Hearthline wanted him gone. His work was part of the asset Vivian intended to buy. "They're selling you a system," he said, "and recommending that you fire the person who knows where it breaks. It may be worse than that." Vivian laid out 2 versions of Hearthline's labor model. The earlier version included trained staff, verification time, and ordinary overtime. The later version assumed the system could run with fewer employees and almost no overtime. "The lower head count creates most of the projected value," she said. "The people on the non-retention list are not duplicates. They are the employees whose schedules or objections make the reduced model difficult." Ben read the categories beside the names. Fixed custody schedule. Medical caregiving. Prior wage complaint. Safety escalation. Union inquiry. The list turned people's obligations into defects. Patras was number 4. "Did your team know?" he asked. They knew Hearthline planned staffing reductions. They did not know how the names were selected. "Did they ask?" Vivian looked at her coffee. "No, Dantito. Did you?" "No." She did not decorate the answer. Ben respected that more than he wanted to. "Why show me this?" he asked. "Because you were right about the pallets, and because your suspension tells me Hearthline is more interested in controlling the question than answering it. Are you canceling the deal?" "I can't cancel it on an inference." "You counted the floor." "We counted one morning. Hearthline says the delays came from a carrier outage and that the labor categories were internal planning notes. Do you believe them?" "No, belief is not the standard." Ben pushed the reports back. "Then what do you want?" Vivian opened a slim folder. Inside was an employment offer from Anchorwell, Director of Inventory Integrity. A salary nearly 40% higher than Ben's current pay. A signing bonus large enough to replace the Subaru and rebuild the emergency fund. Guaranteed weekday hours, limited travel, and a written provision allowing him to work from Milwaukee. For several seconds, Ben simply stared. "You prepared this overnight?" "I have efficient people. Apparently they're less efficient at asking where names come from. That criticism is fair." The offer included a confidentiality agreement. Ben read it once, then again. For 45 days he could not discuss the acquisition, the operational discrepancies, the workforce list, or Hearthline's conduct with employees, customers, or outside parties. He would help Vivian evaluate and correct the system after the deal closed. "You want me to stay quiet until you own the company," he said. "I want time to protect the distribution network while we investigate. Hearthline serves hundreds of small clinics. If the deal collapses abruptly, their lender may freeze operating credit. Employees could lose more than jobs on a list. And if I sign, the deal closes at the price based on my work and their false numbers. The price can be adjusted through a holdback. Will Vale stay? During transition, possibly." Ben gave a short laugh. "You're offering to save me so I can help you preserve the machine that selected everybody else." Vivian's expression hardened. "I'm offering you authority to fix it. After the people who told the truth are gone, no final staffing decisions have been made. Your case says otherwise." The waitress filled Vivian's coffee, sensed the pressure in the booth, and left without asking Ben if he had changed his mind about breakfast. Vivian lowered her voice. I have 6 days before closing. If I accuse Hearthline without evidence strong enough to survive a contract dispute, Anchorwell could lose a $12 million deposit and face years of litigation. My board could remove me. The lender could still force a sale to someone who cares. Ben looked at the salary again. There is for me. Is there? She nodded toward his old car in the lot. You have a daughter. A suspended job. I know what Hearthline pays you. I know the severance for terminated employees is 4 weeks. Do not pretend that refusing this costs you nothing. He hated the sentence because it was true. Vivian closed the folder but left it on his side of the table. The offer expires Sunday at 6. If you accept, I will have Hearthline keep your suspension paid through closing. If you refuse, I cannot control what Vale does. You could pause the deal. Bring me proof that justifies it. You locked me out of the building. I did not. But you're willing to benefit from it. Vivian flinched. Only slightly, but Ben saw it. He took the folder and left the diner. By noon, Hearthline terminated him. The email cited breach of confidentiality, refusal to follow reporting procedures, and loss of trust. His health insurance would end at the close of the month. The availability agreement he had signed the day before was not mentioned. Ben sat in the parked Subaru outside his house and read the email 3 times. Then the transmission made a sharp knock when he shifted into reverse, as if the car had been waiting for the most insulting moment to join the conversation. He did not tell June immediately. Old habits did not disappear because a 13-year-old had identified them accurately over pasta. He spent 2 hours applying for jobs. He updated his resume, removed the phrase currently employed, put it back, then removed it again. He calculated how long the emergency fund would cover rent, utilities, insurance, groceries, and the car. 7 weeks if nothing unexpected happened. Life had never shown much respect for that condition. At 3:10, he closed the laptop and drove to school. June came out carrying her backpack and stopped when she saw him in the pickup lane. Why aren't you at work? Ben reached across and opened the passenger door. Get in. Bad news before dinner, he told her before the car moved. June listened without interrupting. When he finished, she looked straight ahead at the line of buses. Are we moving? She asked. Not today. That sounds like one of your answers. I don't know yet. Are you taking the other job? Ben had shown her the offer because anything less would have turned their rule into another slogan. I want to. But I would have to stay quiet while Vivian closes the deal. Would people get fired? Maybe. Would they get fired if you don't sign? Maybe. June frowned. That is a terrible offer. It is a very good offer attached to a terrible choice. They drove home in silence. At the kitchen table, June took the blue reserved seat card from her backpack and placed it beside Vivian's folder. You came late, she said, touching the card. But you came. I did. If you take this job, are you still coming? Ben read the written schedule protections. According to the contract, yes. That's not what I mean. He knew. June picked up the non-retention list, copy Vivian had allowed him to keep. Her finger stopped at Patricia's name. Does she have kids? 2 grown sons. She takes care of her husband. And they put that on the list? Yes. June moved her finger to another name. What about him? Single father. Little boy, I think. She looked at Ben. So they didn't choose you because you're bad at your job. They chose people who couldn't give the job everything. That's what it looks like. Nobody can give a job everything. People need some of it back. Ben sat very still. The sentence was simple enough to come from a child and sharp enough to reach every excuse he had made for 12 years. His phone rang. It was Malcolm Price, Vivian's chief financial officer. Ben answered on speaker. I heard about the termination, Malcolm said. For what it's worth, I advised Hearthline against it. How much is that worth? Probably nothing to you. Then we agree. Malcolm exhaled. Vivian believes you can help us identify the operational gap. I believe you need to understand what happens if this acquisition fails. Hearthline has violated 2 loan covenants. Without Anchorwell's capital, payroll could be at risk within a month. Is that in the briefcase too? It is in the financial statements. The same statements that say pallets can drive themselves away. The debt is real, Mr. Carter. So are the employees who depend on the company surviving. Martin Vale may deserve to lose his position. 400 warehouse workers do not. June watched Ben's face. Then help me prove it without protecting him, Ben said. How? A 48-hour physical reconciliation. Count every outbound order at label print, dock scan, and carrier acceptance. Compare scheduled hours with actual badge exits. No Vale reports. Raw observation. Hearthline will never authorize that before closing. Vivian can make it a condition of closing. And if they refuse, you have your answer. Malcolm was silent for a long time. It would delay the financing. So buying numbers that aren't real. You make complicated decisions sound simple. No, I make measurable questions sound measurable. Malcolm said he would call back. That evening, Patras came to Ben's house with a grocery bag filled with pay stubs, schedule printouts, and handwritten notes from 7 night shift employees. Ben did not ask anyone for confidential company files. He asked them to bring only their own records and describe only what they had personally seen. One employee had been scheduled for 32 hours after working 47. Another showed clock-out records at 10 p.m. and text messages from a supervisor assigning tasks until midnight. Patras's Tuesday accommodation had been recoded as recurring unavailability 11 days before the non-retention list was created. Can this stop the sale? Patras asked. I don't know. Can it save our jobs? I don't know that either. She studied him. You finally run out of confident answers. My daughter took inventory. Patras smiled, then grew serious. Vale offered me a retention bonus this afternoon. $5,000 if I sign the availability agreement and withdraw my overtime complaint. Did you sign? I brought the offer instead. She placed it on the table. It connected the schedule categories, the wage issue, and the retention decision in one page bearing Vale's signature. Ben photographed it with Patras' permission and sent the image to Vivian. Beneath it, he wrote one sentence. You asked for proof strong enough to pause the deal. Start here, then count the floor. Vivian called at 11:12 that night. Hearthline has agreed to the reconciliation, she said. Agreed or been forced. Does the distinction matter? It will when they decide who to punish. Vale will not control the count. Anchorwell's outside operations team will. Employees may volunteer as paid observers. You will be retained as an independent consultant for the test. And the confidentiality offer? Still open. I won't sign it. Then the director position is off the table. Ben looked toward the hallway. June stood in the doorway in her pajamas, listening. He felt the loss of the salary before he said the words. He felt the car, the insurance, the 7-week fund, and the possibility of his daughter moving 1,000 miles away. A good choice did not arrive with relief. Sometimes it arrived looking exactly like a mistake. Then take it off, he said. The reconciliation began Sunday at 6 in the morning. Ben entered Hearthline through the visitor door wearing a temporary badge that printed his name beneath the word consultant. Luis looked at it and shook his head. They fired you Friday, he said. Apparently I've improved since then. Inside, the warehouse felt different. Every outbound lane had a numbered observer. Anchorwell's operations team recorded label times, physical locations, dock scans, carrier signatures, scheduled hours, and actual exit times. Patras stood at lane 4 with a tablet. 9 other employees had volunteered. They were being paid for the work and had received written protection against retaliation during the review. Martin Vale watched from the glass offices above. At 8:15, the first mismatch appeared. An order closed in the system while its pallet was still being wrapped. At 9, 5 more turned green before reaching the dock. By noon, the number was 43. Vale came down with an attorney and demanded the count stop. "Your consultants are interfering with normal operations," he told Vivian. She stood near Dock 6, with the black briefcase resting on a folding table. "They're watching normal operations. Employees are slowing down because they know they're being observed." Ben said, "Observation doesn't make a labeled print before a truck arrives." Vale ignored him. "This man was terminated for misconduct. His presence contaminates the process. His system is the reason you added $18 million in value to your proposal," Vivian said. "You neglected to mention that when you fired him." Vale's attorney leaned close and whispered something. Vale's face went still. "Hearthline owns all work produced by its employees," he said. "Ownership is not the question," Vivian replied. "Authorship, operating knowledge, and your representations are." The count continued. By Monday morning, 417 orders recorded as shipped had not left the building at the time shown in Hearthline's reports. Actual labor exceeded reported labor by 19%. 12 employees had worked after clocking out, and supervisors had shifted the hours of 28 others into later weeks. The balance gate had not created the promised savings. Managers had disabled the parts that revealed delay, then used the cleaner numbers to justify eliminating the people most likely to object. The raw count answered the operational question. It did not answer what Vivian would do with it. At 10:30, she called Ben, Patris, Malcolm, Vale, and the attorneys to the loading bay. No boardroom. No polished presentation. The disputed pallets stood behind them. Ordinary brown boxes carrying the kind of truth that looked unimpressive until someone counted it. Malcolm summarized the findings. The projected labor savings were not supportable. The service metrics given to Anchorwell were materially inaccurate. The staffing plan created operational risk rather than removing it. Vale blamed a temporary carrier shortage, inexperienced supervisors, and Ben's software. "Mr. Carter designed a system too complicated for a company of this size," he said. "Management used reasonable overrides to keep product moving." Ben placed the original version 3 report on the folding table. "If my system caused the numbers, why did you sell it to Anchorwell as yours?" Vale looked at the report but did not touch it. "And if the overrides kept product moving," Ben continued, "why are the products behind us?" No one spoke. Ben did not enjoy the silence as much as he once would have. Vale was not the whole machine. Removing him would not change the conditions that had rewarded what he did. He looked at Vivian. "You sent a required synergies target without asking what work would disappear." Hearthline answered by making the work invisible. "They did the lying, but your numbers told them which truth would be expensive." Malcolm started to object. Vivian raised one hand. "He's right," she said. She turned toward Vale. "Anchorwell is suspending the closing. We will disclose these findings to the lender and the acquisition committee today. Any revised transaction will require independent verification of payroll, service levels, and ownership of the operating system. It will also require—" Vale's voice dropped. "You are breaching the agreement. Then enforce it. Your board will not accept a $12 million loss because a warehouse coordinator dislikes our reporting." Vivian's hand rested on the briefcase latch. "My board may remove me. Anchorwell may lose the deposit. You may sue us. Those are consequences. They are not reasons to buy a lie." There was no applause. Patris lowered her eyes. Malcolm reread the first page of his findings. Vale conferred with his attorney and left through the same aisle where he had once ordered Ben back to work. Vivian remained beside the folding table. "You understand that suspending the sale does not guarantee this warehouse survives," she told Ben. "Yes. It may have been safer for the employees if I closed and repaired it afterward." "Maybe." She seemed surprised. "I thought you wanted me to say you made the right choice." "I wanted you to make an honest one. Right choices usually take longer to identify." Vivian looked toward the floor where employees had returned to their stations. "You really are difficult to manage." That belongs on a list. The next 3 weeks were not a victory montage. Hearthline's lender froze expansion spending. 2 suppliers tightened payment terms. Overtime was reduced, and every employee worried that exposing the false numbers had merely changed the route by which they would lose their jobs. Ben remained unemployed during the first week. He applied to 14 companies and received 3 automated rejections. The Subaru stopped shifting cleanly into third gear. June began packing lunch instead of buying it at school without being asked. When Ben noticed, guilt tightened in his chest. "You don't have to do that," he told her. "I like sandwiches." "You hate sandwiches." "I'm developing range." He told her they had enough for lunch. She admitted she was trying to help. Neither pretended the worry was gone. That was the difference. They let it sit at the table without asking one person to carry it upstairs alone. Alyssa called every evening. She did not repeat the offer to have June move to Denver. Instead, she helped Ben compare health insurance options and offered to cover June's summer flight early. "This is help," she said. "Not a custody strategy." "I know." You said that without arguing. "Unemployment has broadened me. Let's not get carried away." At the end of the second week, Hearthline's owners removed Vail and 2 senior managers. The lender agreed to a 60-day operating standstill after Anchorwell offered a limited credit line tied to verified orders, not reported ones. The acquisition did not close under the old agreement. A smaller restructured deal would be considered only after employees received corrected pay. The staffing list was discarded, and an independent committee reviewed retention decisions. Not every wrong became a lawsuit. Not every lost hour could be reconstructed. Patras and the other employees filed wage claims with help from counsel, and Hearthline began issuing corrected checks. The process was slow enough to feel real, and fast enough to matter. On the 4th Monday, Ben was invited back to the warehouse. Vivian waited at Station 14 with the black briefcase. "Lose it again?" he asked. "No. This time I knew who I was bringing it to." She opened the case. The red non-retention list was gone. In its place sat a revised operating plan, a letter acknowledging Ben as the original designer of the balance gate, and an offer for him to lead systems integrity during the 60-day standstill. The salary was lower than the director offer. There was no signing bonus. The position did include fixed weekday hours, transparent travel limits, and the authority to publish exception reports to both operations and the independent committee. It also allowed any employee to question a metric without routing the concern through the manager being measured by it. "No confidentiality clause?" Ben asked. "Normal protection for customer information. Nothing about the review." "Who approved the schedule?" "I did." "Who can change it?" "You and the committee." Ben closed the folder. "I need until tomorrow." Vivian raised an eyebrow. "You made me decide on a $200 million transaction in 6 days. My daughter gets a night." At home, he placed the offer in the kitchen drawer before dinner. Then he and June read it together. She did not decide for him. She asked whether the job let him tell the truth, whether Patras would still have someone to report to, and whether he would be home for the spring music program. "It says I will," Ben said. "Contracts can be wrong. I've been following the story. Then I'll put it on the calendar and leave when the clock says leave. Even if Vivian Sloan asks you to stay. Especially then. She enjoys character development." Ben accepted the job the next morning. Months later, the warehouse still had problems. Honest systems did not make work easy. They made difficulty visible. Orders no longer turned green at the printer. Schedule accommodations were recorded as obligations the company had agreed to, not weaknesses employees had failed to overcome. Anchorwell completed the restructured purchase at a lower price, with money reserved for payroll corrections and system repairs. Vivian kept her position after a brutal board review, though 2 directors resigned from the acquisition committee. Malcolm stayed too. He began asking for names behind labor categories, which was a small change in a spreadsheet and a large change everywhere else. Ben did not become rich. He did not receive a public award. Most customers never learned his name, which suited him. He built a new version of the balance gate with a simpler formula, trained 3 people to maintain it, and took every other Friday afternoon off during June's school term. D. Patras became co-chair of the employee review group and developed a habit of returning any report containing the phrase human capital flexibility with the word human circled in red. One Thursday, Vivian visited Station 14 carrying the same scuffed briefcase. She opened it to remove a quarterly report, and Ben saw his name on the first page again. This time it appeared beneath a different heading: people required to verify the system. "That title is a little dramatic," he said. "You objected to key personnel. I objected to irreplaceable. Nobody should be irreplaceable." Vivian took out a pen and crossed out required. Above it, she wrote responsible. "Better." Ben nodded. "Better." That evening, the Subaru made one final metallic knock and refused to leave the grocery store parking lot. Ben called a tow truck, then called June instead of spending an hour privately inventing a painless explanation. "Bad news before bedtime," he said when she answered. "The transmission is done. We're going to have to change the summer budget." June was quiet for a moment. Ben let her be worried. He did not rush to erase it. "Okay," she said. "What's the plan?" Ben looked at the groceries in the back seat, the tow truck turning into the lot, and the blue reserved seat card June had tucked above his visor months earlier. The crease still ran through the word Dad, but the card had held together. "We figure it out together," he said.